True mates are sacred bonds that cannot be broken. That's what the moon goddess herself decreed to all werewolf kind. But when you're the one being rejected in front of the entire pack, you learn that even divine connections mean nothing against an alpha's pride. The rejection ceremony was supposed to be private, a quiet moment between mates where Lyra would gracefully accept Alpha Cade's decision and fade into obscurity like so many rejected she-wolves before her. But Lyra had other plans. Standing in the center of the grand throne room, surrounded by the most powerful werewolves in the kingdom, she felt the mate bond searing through her chest, like molten silver. Every instinct screamed at her, to submit, to bow her head and accept her fate quietly. Instead, she lifted her chin higher. "I, Lyra Nightshade, accept your rejection, Alpha Cade Blackthorn," she declared, her voice carrying across the marble pillars with supernatural clarity. "But I reject you, in return." The gasps that followed were audible even over the crackling of the ceremonial fires. In 300 years of werewolf law, no rejected mate had ever dared to speak those words back to an alpha. But Lyra wasn't finished. Chapter 1. The Plain Wolf Among Giants. 3 days earlier, the Nightshade Pack had been nothing more than a forgotten border territory, the kind of place where reject wolves and outcasts scraped together, an existence far from the gleaming capital cities of the werewolf kingdom. Lyra had grown up knowing exactly what she was. The daughter of failed warriors, granddaughter of rogues, bearer of a bloodline, so diluted that her wolf form was gray, instead of the rich blacks and browns that marked true nobility. At 22, she'd never shifted into anything larger than an average-sized wolf, had never displayed any special abilities, and had certainly never expected to catch the attention of anyone important, which made the arrival of the royal convoy all the more shocking. "They're here for the moonstone ceremony," her adoptive mother, Alina, had whispered as they watched the procession of black vehicles wind through their tiny village. "The king himself is conducting the annual mate bond revelations." Lyra had watched from behind their cracked kitchen window as wolves in pristine uniforms emerged from vehicles that probably cost more than their entire pack's annual income. At the center of it all, commanding attention without even trying, was Alpha Cade Blackthorn. Even from a distance, Lyra could feel something stirring in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer heat, and everything to do with the impossible recognition that whispered through her very soul. "Mate?" She'd laughed at the absurdity of it. Lyra Nightshade, unremarkable in every possible way, mated to the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. The moon goddess had to be playing some kind of cosmic joke. But when Cade's head had snapped in her direction across the village square, when those storm-gray eyes had locked onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak, she'd known the bond was real. And from the way his expression had immediately shifted from recognition to disgust, she'd also known exactly what he thought about it. A mistake, she'd heard him mutter to his beta, as they were introduced that evening at the ceremonial dinner. The moon goddess must have made a mistake. Lyra had spent the next 2 days watching Cade interact with her pack, seeing the barely concealed contempt in his eyes every time he was forced to acknowledge her existence. She'd watched him charm the other unmated females, wolves with prestigious bloodlines and impressive abilities, who would make suitable mates for an alpha of his standing. She'd also watched the way he'd looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the hunger in his gaze when the mate bond flared between them, the way his hands would clench into fists when she was near, as if he was fighting the urge to reach for her. The bond was real. The attraction was undeniable, but his pride was stronger than both, which brought them to tonight. The formal moonstone ceremony where all mate bonds discovered during the king's visit would be officially recognized or formally rejected. Lyra had known what was coming. She'd seen it in Cade's cold, professional demeanor all day. She'd felt it in the way he'd avoided looking at her directly, the way he'd positioned himself as far from her as possible during the pre-ceremony rituals. She'd come to the throne room prepared to accept his rejection gracefully, to bow her head and fade away like a good little nobody should. But as she'd stood there, watching Cade announce his rejection in front of hundreds of witnesses, watching the smirks on the faces of the noble wolves who'd always known she didn't belong, Something inside her had snapped. Not her heart, that had been breaking steadily for days. Her fear. For the first time in her life, Lyra Nightshade had stopped caring what people thought of her. And apparently, when you stopped caring about fitting in, you discovered you had a lot more power than anyone had ever given you credit for. Chapter 2. The False Hope. The silence that followed Lyra's counter-rejection stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. King Aldrich himself sat frozen on his throne, his ancient eyes wide with something that might have been shock or admiration. The assembled nobles looked between Lyra and Cade, as if watching a tennis match where the ball had suddenly caught fire. Cade's face had gone completely blank, the kind of dangerous calm that preceded either complete submission or total annihilation. "You," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't reject me back. That's not how this works." Lyra felt something wild and reckless unfurling in her chest. Maybe it was the mate bond finally snapping, or maybe it was 22 years of being invisible finally reaching a breaking point. Either way, she found herself smiling. "Actually," she said, turning toward the ancient werewolf law books that sat on a pedestal near the king's throne, according to the original moon goddess statutes, any mate bond acknowledged by both parties can be dissolved by either party. The fact that most rejected wolves choose not to reject back doesn't mean they can't. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Lyra could see several of the court scholars frantically flipping through their own copies of the law books, their expressions growing more surprised by the second. She's correct," stammered the head scholar, a thin wolf named Marcus, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "The reciprocal rejection clause exists. It's just never been invoked because no one has ever been foolish enough to try," Cade finished, his voice deadly quiet. But something had shifted in the room's energy. What had started as a humiliating public rejection was now something else entirely. A legal challenge that even the king couldn't ignore. "Fascinating," King Aldrich said slowly, leaning forward in his throne. His voice carried the weight of centuries, and when he spoke, everyone listened. "In 300 years of rule, I have never witnessed a reciprocal rejection. Tell me, young Nightshade, do you understand what you've just done?" Lyra's newfound courage flickered slightly under the king's intense stare, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "I've rejected the wolf who rejected me, Your Majesty. Nothing more, nothing less." "Nothing more?" Cade stepped closer, and Lyra could feel the fury radiating off him in waves. "You've just challenged the natural order. Alphas don't get rejected by wolves like me?" Lyra finished. "You're right. Alphas don't usually get rejected by anyone, because most wolves are too afraid to use their own goddess-given rights. But I'm not most wolves." The lie came so smoothly she almost believed it herself. The truth was, she was terrified. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. But she was also angry, angrier than she'd ever been in her life. And anger, she was discovering, was a hell of a lot more useful than fear. "This is unprecedented," King Aldrich mused, and for the first time since entering the throne room, he looked genuinely entertained. "Marcus, what does the law say about reciprocal rejections?" The head scholar cleared his throat nervously. "According to the ancient texts, Your Majesty, when both parties formally reject the mate bond, it creates what's called a severed bond status. Both wolves are considered legally free to pursue other mates, with no obligation to their former bond partner." "Interesting." The king's eyes gleamed with something that made Lyra's wolf instincts prickle with warning. "And what about compensation?" "Compensation." Lyra and Cade spoke in unison. "Oh yes," King Aldrich smiled, showing teeth that were still perfectly sharp despite his advanced age. "The severed bond status requires compensation to be paid by the party who initiated the rejection sequence. Since Alpha Cade spoke first, he let the implication hang in the air. The color drained from Cade's face. "Your Majesty, surely you can't be serious. The Blackthorn Pack assets are considerable, yes." The king's smile widened, which makes this all the more intriguing. "Tell me, Miss Nightshade, Are you familiar with the traditional compensation for a severed mate bond? Lyra's mouth went dry. She'd been running on pure adrenaline and righteous anger, but she hadn't thought beyond the moment of rejecting Kade back. The idea that there might be legal consequences that benefited her, hadn't even occurred to her. No, Your Majesty. I'm not familiar with the specifics. The rejected party is entitled to claim equivalent status compensation. Marcus read from his book, his voice growing stronger as he found his footing in familiar legal territory. Meaning, if an alpha rejects a mate, and that mate reciprocally rejects, the rejected party gains the right to claim alpha status and territory equivalent to what they would have gained through the mate bond. The throne room erupted in shocked whispers. Lyra felt her knees go weak as the full implications hit her. You mean, she started. I mean, King Aldrich said, his ancient eyes twinkling with mischief, that you, Lyra Nightshade, have just legally claimed the right to your own alpha territory. Congratulations, my dear. You've just gone from rejected mate to pack leader in the span of a single conversation. The look of absolute horror on Kade's face was almost worth the heart attack she was currently having. Almost. If stories like Lyra's remind you that worth can't be destroyed by cruelty, subscribe to join others who believe hidden strength deserves recognition. Chapter 3. The Betrayal. The celebration in Lyra's heart lasted exactly 14 seconds. That's how long it took for Kade to recover from his shock, and remember that he was an alpha who had never lost a battle, political or otherwise, in his entire life. Your Majesty, Kade said, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. While I appreciate the educational value of this legal exercise, I think we're overlooking something important. King Aldrich raised an eyebrow. Oh? The reciprocal rejection law requires that both parties be of equal standing when the bond is acknowledged. Kade's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Miss Nightshade may have been born into the Nightshade pack, but she's not actually a member anymore. Lyra's blood turned to ice. What do you mean? I mean, Kade continued, pulling a document from his jacket with theatrical flair, that 3 hours ago, your pack leader Elena Nightshade formally expelled you from the pack for conduct unbecoming of pack loyalty. The paper rustled as he unfolded it, and Lyra could see Elena's signature at the bottom even from across the room, her adoptive mother's signature, authorizing her exile. The expulsion was filed with the Royal Registry this afternoon. Kade went on, his voice growing stronger as he sensed victory, which means that when you attempted to reject me back, you were no longer a pack member. You were a rogue wolf, and rogue wolves have no legal standing to invoke reciprocal rejection rights. The throne room spun around Lyra as the full scope of the trap became clear. This hadn't been a spontaneous humiliation. This had been planned, orchestrated. Elena, the woman who had raised her, who had called her daughter for 17 years, had sold her out for political favor with the most powerful alpha in the kingdom. Elena? Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the renewed murmuring of the crowd. She could see her adoptive mother now, standing near the back of the throne room with tears streaming down her face, but she didn't deny it, didn't speak up to defend Lyra or claim the document was forged. She just stood there, crying silent tears that felt like knives in Lyra's chest. The expulsion is properly documented, Marcus confirmed after examining the papers, his voice heavy with something that might have been sympathy, filed at 3:47 p.m. today, with 2 witness signatures, and the official pack seal. Which means, Kade said triumphantly, that Miss Nightshade's attempted rejection holds no legal weight. She spoke as a rogue, and rogues cannot invoke mate bond law. The original rejection stands, with no compensation required. King Aldrich studied the document for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Lyra held her breath, hoping against hope that the ancient monarch might find some loophole, some technicality that could save her from this public destruction. Instead, he nodded slowly. The law is clear. Without pack standing, there can be no reciprocal rejection. His eyes found Lyra's across the room. I'm sorry, child. You played the game well, but you were outmaneuvered before it began. The defeat was crushing, but it was the betrayal that truly destroyed her, Lyra looked again at Alina, the woman who had found her as a 5-year-old orphan and promised to love her as her own daughter. The woman who had taught her to read, who had bandaged her scraped knees, who had held her through nightmares and told her she was worthy of love. The woman who had thrown her to the wolves, literally, for a chance to curry favor with Alpha Cade. Why? Lyra asked, her voice breaking on the single word. Alina finally spoke, her words barely a whisper, but carrying clearly in the silent throne room. He promised to protect the pack. Said, if I helped him avoid the political complications of rejecting his mate, he would ensure our territory remained secure. Our people would be safe. Our people, Lyra repeated hollowly. But not me. You were never really one of us, Alina said, and each word was a separate blade. Your bloodline, your strength, we all knew you'd never truly belong. This way, at least your sacrifice means something. At least the pack survives. The cruel mathematics of it was breathtaking. Trade one worthless pack member for the protection of dozens of others. From a purely practical standpoint, it was the smart play. From a human standpoint, it was the kind of betrayal that shattered souls. Lyra felt something inside her chest crack and fall away. Not her heart, which had already been broken by Cade's initial rejection, but something deeper, the part of her that had always believed that if she just tried hard enough, was good enough, quiet enough, she might eventually earn her place in the world. That part died right there on the marble floor of the throne room, in front of hundreds of witnesses, who were now looking at her with a mixture of pity and second-hand embarrassment. Well then, she said, her voice surprisingly steady for someone whose entire world had just collapsed. I suppose that settles it. She turned to face Cade, who was watching her with something that might have been satisfaction, or might have been regret. It was hard to tell, and Lyra found she no longer cared. Congratulations, Alpha, she said, with a small bow. You won. I hope it was worth the effort. She started toward the throne room doors, planning to walk out with whatever dignity she could salvage, maybe find a cliff somewhere, and contemplate whether jumping off it would be more or less painful than living with this level of humiliation. But King Aldrich's voice stopped her before she'd taken 3 steps. Miss Nightshade, the ancient monarch called, his voice carrying an odd note of anticipation. Before you go, there's something else you should know. Lyra turned back, too emotionally exhausted to feel hope or fear. The king smiled, and this time, there was something predatory in the expression. You may not be able to invoke reciprocal rejection rights as a rogue, but there is one other legal avenue available to you. Your Majesty? Marcus looked confused. The right of challenge, King Aldrich said simply. Any wolf who has been wronged by an alpha may invoke the ancient right to challenge them for dominance, win, and you gain everything they would have lost to reciprocal rejection compensation. Lose, he shrugged eloquently. Lose and you die, Cade finished, his voice tight with something that might have been worry. Precisely, the king's eyes gleamed. Tell me, Miss Nightshade, are you familiar with the right of challenge? Lyra's mouth was too dry to speak, so she just shook her head. It's quite simple, really. King Aldrich continued conversationally. Single combat. No weapons. No assistance. No mercy. The challenged party chooses the time and manner of combat, but it must take place within 7 days of the challenge being issued. Winner takes all. He leaned forward in his throne, and for the first time all evening, he looked genuinely interested in the outcome. The question is, do you have the courage to issue such a challenge, or will you walk away and live with the knowledge that you let them destroy you without a fight? The throne room held its breath. Even Elena had stopped crying, watching Lyra with wide, horrified eyes. Cade, for his part, looked like a man watching a mouse decide whether to attack a cat, confident in the outcome, but surprised by the potential audacity. Lyra looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Noble wolves, who had never known hunger or rejection, powerful alphas, who had been born into their strength, court officials, who served at the pleasure of kings, and never had to wonder if they'd have a home tomorrow. None of them understood what it was like to have nothing left to lose. But Lyra was about to show them. Chapter 4. Exile begins. I, Lyra Nightshade, invoke the right of challenge against Alpha Cade Blackthorn. The words left her mouth before her rational mind could stop them. They hung in the air like a death sentence, which realistically they probably were. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the throne room gasped in shock, while the other half burst into excited whispers. Someone in the back actually started laughing. A high, disbelieving sound that cut through the chaos like a blade. Cade stared at her, as if she'd just sprouted a second head. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," Lyra replied, surprised by how calm she sounded. Inside, her wolf was pacing frantically, whining about the insanity of challenging an alpha who could probably snap her neck with one hand. But the human part of her, Myrus, the part that was tired of being small and scared and forgettable, felt oddly peaceful. "This is madness," Elena whispered from her spot near the back wall. "Lyra, please, just walk away. You've made your point." "Have I?" Lyra turned to face her former pack leader, her former mother, her former everything. "What point would that be, Elena? That I'm exactly as weak and worthless as everyone always believed? That you were right to trade me away like damaged livestock? That's not what That's exactly what you meant." Lyra's voice carried a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You meant that I was expendable, that my life, my happiness, my future, none of it mattered as much as your political convenience." She turned back to King Aldrich, who was watching the proceedings with the delighted expression of someone enjoying an unexpectedly entertaining show. "Your Majesty, I formally request that you witness my challenge." "Witnessed and accepted," the king replied immediately, clearly having the time of his ancient life. "Alpha Blackthorn, you are legally bound to respond. Will you accept the challenge?" Cade looked around the room as if hoping someone would explain how his perfectly orchestrated evening had gone so completely sideways. His beta, a broad-shouldered wolf named Derek, was making frantic abort mission gestures from the sidelines. "She's a rogue with no pack training," Cade said finally. "She's never even been in a real fight. This isn't a challenge. It's assisted suicide." "Nevertheless," King Aldrich said cheerfully, "the law is the law. You must either accept the challenge or formally acknowledge her as your superior and grant her the compensation she originally claimed." The silence that followed was deafening. Lyra could practically see the wheels turning in Cade's head as he weighed his options. Accept the challenge and risk looking like a bully who killed helpless rogue wolves for sport, or back down and lose face in front of the entire supernatural political establishment. "Fine," he said eventually, his voice tight with controlled fury. "I accept, but I choose the terms of combat." "Of course you do," Lyra muttered. 7 days from tonight, at the Moonrise Arena, shifted combat, no weapons, fight to submission, or..." He paused, giving her one last chance to back down, "or death." "Agreed." The word came out steadier than Lyra felt. "Then it's settled," King Aldrich announced, clapping his hands together with evident satisfaction. "Let the record show that Lyra Nightshade has invoked the right of challenge against Alpha Cade Blackthorn, with combat to take place in 7 days' time. Until then, both parties are under royal protection and may not be harmed or interfered with by any other party." He stood from his throne, a clear signal that the evening's entertainment had concluded. "Court is dismissed. I do so look forward to next week's festivities." As the assembled nobles began filing out of the throne room, chattering excitedly about the unprecedented drama they'd just witnessed, Lyra found herself standing alone in the center of the marble floor. Alone, and beginning to realize the full scope of what she'd just committed herself to. 7 days to prepare for a fight against one of the most powerful alphas in the kingdom. 7 days to somehow become strong enough to survive combat with a wolf who had been training for battle since childhood. 7 days to figure out how to avoid being torn apart in front of hundreds of spectators. 7 days to live. "Lyra." Elena's voice was small and broken as she approached. "What I should have done years ago," Lyra replied without turning around. "I stopped letting other people decide what I was worth." "He's going to kill you." "Probably." Lyra finally faced the woman who had raised her. But at least I'll die as myself, instead of living as whatever convenient fiction you and Cade needed me to be. Alina's face crumpled. I never wanted this. I thought if you just accepted the rejection quietly, you could start over somewhere else, find a small pack that would take you in, maybe find happiness with someone more suitable. Lyra laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean weaker? Someone who wouldn't make me dream above my station. I meant someone who could love you without destroying you, Elena whispered. For a moment Lyra's anger wavered. She could see the genuine pain in Elena's eyes, the regret that came too late to change anything. Part of her nurse, the part that had been a daughter for 17 years, wanted to forgive, to understand, to find some way to salvage something from the wreckage of their relationship. But then she remembered standing in this same throne room 20 minutes ago, hearing Elena confirm her expulsion without even trying to defend her. Remembered the careful planning that had gone into ensuring Lyra's humiliation was as complete as possible. If you had loved me, Lyra said quietly, you would never have signed that expulsion order. Love doesn't come with political calculations, Elena. What you felt for me was convenient affection at best. She turned and walked toward the throne room doors, where a small group of royal guards was waiting to escort her to whatever accommodations had been prepared for condemned challengers. Lyra, wait. Elena's voice was desperate now. Where will you go? How will you prepare? You can't face him alone. Lyra paused at the threshold, her hand on the massive wooden door. I've been alone my whole life, she said without looking back. I just finally stopped pretending otherwise. The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder, cutting off Elena's reply and sealing Lyra's fate. The royal guard captain, a grizzled wolf named Commander Hayes, was waiting in the corridor with an expression that mixed professional courtesy with genuine sympathy. Miss Nightshade, he said formally, His Majesty has arranged quarters for you in the Tower of Contemplation. You'll have access to training facilities and a modest library. Is there anything specific you require for your preparation? Lyra almost laughed at the careful euphemism. Preparation. As if 7 days of training could somehow level the playing field between her and an alpha who had been bred for dominance. Actually, she said, surprising herself, there is something. I need to know everything you have about Alpha Blackthorn's fighting style, his weaknesses, his preferred tactics, anything that might give me even the smallest advantage. Commander Hayes raised an eyebrow. Planning to fight dirty, miss? Planning to survive, Lyra corrected. And if that requires fighting dirty, then I'll become the dirtiest fighter you've ever seen. The commander's weathered face split into the first genuine smile she'd seen all evening. Now that, he said, sounds like the attitude of a wolf who might actually make this interesting. Chapter 5. The Opportunity. The Tower of Contemplation was exactly as depressing as it sounded. Built into the eastern wall of the royal castle, it was traditionally used to house prisoners of noble birth, wolves who had committed crimes serious enough to warrant confinement, but whose bloodlines were too valuable to simply execute outright. The circular stone room had one window, one bed, one desk, and the kind of oppressive silence that made you acutely aware of your own mortality. Lyra had been staring at the ceiling for 3 hours when the knock came. Enter, she called, assuming it was a servant bringing her evening meal or another stack of combat manuals that wouldn't do her any good against an alpha who could probably bench press a small car. Instead, Commander Hayes stepped into the room, followed by a figure that made Lyra's breath catch in her throat. The woman was ancient, not in the tired, weathered way of old humans, but in the timeless, dangerous way of predators who had survived centuries through cunning rather than strength. Her silver hair was braided with small bones and dark stones, and her eyes held the kind of knowledge that came from watching empires rise and fall. Miss Nightshade, Commander Hayes said formally, may I present Oracle Vera Moonwhisper, keeper of the old ways and advisor to 3 generations of kings. Lyra scrambled to her feet, suddenly aware that she was in the presence of werewolf royalty. Oracle Vera was a legend, the last of the ancient shamans, who remembered magic from before the Great Suppression, when werewolves had power beyond just shifting shapes. Your Majesty, Lyra stammered, then caught herself. I mean, Oracle. I apologize. I don't know the proper. Child, Oracle Vera interrupted, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. In 3 days, you're going to die unless something changes dramatically. We don't have time for proper etiquette. She moved into the room with fluid grace, settling into the single chair as if it were a throne. Commander Hayes retreated to the doorway, clearly planning to stand guard. I've come to make you an offer, the Oracle continued, one that could save your life, if you're brave enough to accept it. Lyra's heart began to race. What kind of offer? The kind that your great-grandmother would have understood. Oracle Vera's eyes glittered in the candlelight. Tell me, child, what do you know about your bloodline? Your real bloodline, not the watered-down story Elena told you about failed warriors and forgotten rogues. Lyra sat back down hard on the bed. I don't know anything about my real bloodline. Elena found me when I was 5. I don't remember anything from before then. Of course you don't. Memory suppression was part of the binding spell. The Oracle leaned forward, studying Lyra's face with uncomfortable intensity. But bindings weaken over time, especially under extreme emotional stress. Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in the past few days? Dreams, perhaps? Flashes of scenes that feel like memories but couldn't possibly be yours. Lyra's mouth went dry. How did you? Because I cast the original binding 20 years ago, at the request of a dying woman who wanted to protect her granddaughter from enemies who would kill her for her heritage. Oracle Vera's expression softened slightly. Your real name isn't Lyra Nightshade, child. It's Lyra Silverblood, last surviving heir of the Moon's Crown bloodline. The room spun around Lyra, as memories she'd dismissed as weird dreams suddenly snapped into focus. A woman with silver hair singing lullabies in an ancient language. A man with eyes like starlight teaching her to call wolves down from the mountains. A burning building and screams, and someone shoving her into a cave while shouting about protection spells and hidden bloodlines. The Moon's Crown bloodline, she whispered. But that's extinct. Everyone knows the Silverbloods were wiped out during the Purge Wars. Everyone knows what we wanted them to know. Oracle Vera corrected. Your grandmother, Isabella Silverblood, was the most powerful Alpha Queen in werewolf history. She could command wolves across entire kingdoms, could shift into forms that legends are made of, could work magic that made the earth itself tremble. She was also smart enough to know that power like that makes you a target. So she hid me. She died protecting you, the Oracle said quietly, along with the rest of your family, when the coalition of lesser alphas decided that the Silver bloodline had become too powerful to allow to continue. You were 5 years old, the sole survivor, hidden away with binding spells that would suppress your abilities until you were old enough to claim them safely. Lyra felt like she was drowning. You're saying I'm… what? Some kind of secret werewolf princess? I'm saying you're the genetic descendant of the most powerful supernatural bloodline in recorded history, and that your abilities have been artificially suppressed for 2 decades. Oracle Vera stood, moving to the window to stare out at the moonlit courtyard. I'm also saying that those bindings are starting to crack, and in 3 days you're going to need every advantage you can get. But if I'm so powerful, why haven't I felt it? Why am I still just… Because power without training is just dangerous potential. The Oracle turned back to face her. Which brings me to my offer. I can break the binding spells tonight. I can give you access to your full heritage, your complete abilities, everything your bloodline should have granted you from birth. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. What's the catch? Oracle Vera smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp to be entirely human. Smart girl. The catch is that 20 years of suppressed power released all at once will either kill you or transform you into something beyond current werewolf understanding. There's no middle ground, no partial awakening. You either survive the transition and become what you were born to be, or you die in the process. And if I don't take the offer, then you face Alpha Blackthorn with the abilities of an average rogue wolf, and you die in approximately 30 seconds after the combat begins. The choice, when laid out like that, didn't feel like much of a choice at all. What would I become? Lyra asked. If I survive the transition, what exactly would I be? Oracle Vera's expression grew distant, as if she were seeing something far beyond the stone walls of the tower. You would become what your great-grandmother was before the other alphas grew too frightened to let her live, she said softly. A true alpha queen. A wolf who can command pack bonds across kingdoms, who can shift into forms that exist beyond normal werewolf limitations, who can work the old magic that shaped the world before humans learned to fear what they couldn't understand. She paused, meeting Lyra's eyes directly. You would become powerful enough that Alpha Cade Blackthorn would kneel at your feet and beg for the mercy he never showed you. The image was intoxicating. Lyra could almost see it, Cade's face when he realized what she truly was, Elena's horror when she understood what she'd thrown away, the entire supernatural world learning that the silver bloodline hadn't died out after all. But she could also imagine dying in agony as 20 years of suppressed power tore her apart from the inside. How long do I have to decide? She asked. The ritual must be performed at midnight, on the night before your challenge, Oracle Vera replied. The moon will be at its strongest, and you'll need every advantage the lunar cycle can provide. That gives you 4 days to choose. Continue as you are, and die as a forgotten rogue, or risk everything for the chance to reclaim your birthright. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, child. If you choose the ritual and survive, there will be no going back. You cannot suppress power once it's been awakened, cannot pretend to be small and harmless once you've shown the world what you truly are. You will spend the rest of your life as either a queen or a target. And if I'm both? Oracle Vera's smile was sharp as winter moonlight. Then the supernatural world is about to become a much more interesting place. Chapter 6. First Trial. 4 days had never felt shorter or longer simultaneously. Lyra spent them in a strange liminal space, between her old life and whatever came next. During the day, she trained with Commander Hayes and his best fighters, learning basic combat techniques that felt laughably inadequate against an alpha of Cade's caliber. During the evenings, she pored over ancient texts that Oracle Vera had provided, journals and spellbooks written in the old tongue that her suppressed memories were slowly helping her decipher. And during the long, sleepless nights, she wrestled with a decision that would either save her life or end it more dramatically than Cade ever could. On the third night, she had an unexpected visitor. The knock was soft, almost apologetic. When Lyra opened the door, she found herself face to face with a young woman about her own age, someone with the kind of ethereal beauty that marked high-ranking wolf nobility, golden hair, perfect features, and eyes the color of forest shadows. Miss Nightshade, the woman said hesitantly. My name is Arya Moonstone. I was supposed to be Alpha Cade's chosen mate. Before you complicated things. Lyra blinked in surprise. She'd heard whispers about Arya Moonstone, daughter of the Western Pax Alpha, blessed with both beauty and political connections, the kind of perfect match that powerful families arranged for their heirs. I'm sorry, Lyra said automatically, then caught herself. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. You're better off without him. Arya's laugh was bitter. That's what I came to tell you, actually. You're not the first mate he's rejected. She stepped into the room uninvited, her nervous energy filling the small space. May I sit? This is complicated. Lyra gestured to the chair, settling onto the bed herself. Complicated how? Cade and I have known each other since childhood. Our families always assumed we'd eventually mate. Good bloodlines, compatible territories, all the usual political advantages. Arya's hands twisted in her lap. But when we both came of age, and no mate bond appeared, my father pushed for an arranged mating anyway, political alliance masquerading as romance. But Cade refused? Oh no. He was perfectly willing to go through with it, until 3 months ago, when he met his true mate during a border negotiation. Arya's expression darkened. A beautiful beta from the Southern Pax named Celeste Ravenclaw. The bond was immediate, powerful, undeniable. Lyra felt something cold settle in her stomach. What happened to her? The same thing that almost happened to you. Except she wasn't brave enough to fight back. Arya's voice was flat with suppressed anger. He rejected her publicly, claimed she wasn't suitable for an alpha of his standing. She accepted it quietly, like a good little wolf, and disappeared into exile. And then he found me. And then he found you. Arya met Lyra's eyes directly. Do you want to know the real reason he rejected you so viciously? It wasn't because you weren't good enough. It was because you were too good. The mate bond between you two was stronger than anything he'd ever experienced. Stronger even than what he felt for Celeste, and that terrified him. The room fell silent as Lyra processed this information. Everything she'd assumed about Cade's motivations, about her own unworthiness, suddenly looked different through this lens. He's afraid of genuine connection, she said slowly. He's afraid of losing control, Arya corrected. Cade has spent his entire life being told he's destined for greatness, that he'll unite the werewolf kingdoms through strategic alliances and careful political maneuvering. The idea of being genuinely vulnerable to someone, of needing them in ways he can't control or manipulate, it goes against everything he thinks he is. Lyra stood and walked to the window, staring out at the moonlit courtyard where she would either die or triumph in less than 24 hours. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I've spent the last 4 days watching the political fallout from your challenge, Arya said. The other alphas are nervous, not about the fight itself. Everyone assumes Cade will win easily. They're nervous about what happens after. Think about it. You've just demonstrated that rejected mates have more legal rights than anyone realized. You've shown that the old laws can be invoked by anyone brave enough to use them. Word is already spreading to other packs, other territories. Arya's voice grew more intense. There's talk of other rejected wolves coming forward, of challenges being issued against alphas who thought they were untouchable. Lyra turned back to face her visitor. You think I've started something. I think you've lit a fuse that's been waiting to explode for decades, Arya said bluntly. And I think the established power structure is about to do everything they can to snuff it out before it spreads. She stood and moved toward the door, then paused. There's something else you should know. Cade isn't planning to fight fair. Lyra's blood chilled. What do you mean? I mean, he's been meeting with a combat enhancer named Victor Shadowbane, someone who specializes in augmenting alpha abilities for important fights. Arya's expression was grim. It's not technically illegal, since the enhancers are derived from natural werewolf hormones, but it's definitely not sporting. So he gets to be supernaturally enhanced, and I get to be naturally dead. Unless you find your own advantages. Arya reached into her jacket and pulled out a small leather journal. This belonged to Celeste Ravenclaw. She left it behind when she went into exile. And I thought you might find it useful. Lyra took the journal, feeling the weight of secrets in its worn leather binding. What's in it? Everything she learned about Cade during their brief time together. His fighting style, his weaknesses, his fears. Arya smiled grimly. Turns out rejected mates make very thorough intelligence gatherers. She moved toward the door again, then stopped one final time. Lyra, whatever you're planning for tomorrow night, whatever advantages you think you might have, be careful. The political implications of you actually winning are staggering. There are wolves who would rather see you dead than see the power structure change. Are you one of them? Arya's smile was sharp as a blade. Honey, I've spent my entire life being told my only value was as breeding stock for powerful alphas. If you can tear down that system and rebuild it into something better, you have my full support. After she left, Lyra sat on her bed with Celeste's journal in her lap, afraid to open it. Part of her didn't want to know Cade's secrets, didn't want to understand him better than she already did. It was easier to hate someone when they remained a mystery. But easier wasn't going to keep her alive tomorrow night. She opened the journal and began to read. Day 1. Met my mate today, Alpha Cade Blackthorn of the Northern Territories. The bond hit like lightning. I've never felt anything so intense. He seemed equally affected, but there was something in his eyes. Fear? Why would an alpha fear his own mate? Day 3. Cade keeps avoiding being alone with me. When we are together, He's charming but distant, like he's playing a role instead of being himself. I catch him watching me sometimes, and the hunger in his gaze makes my wolf purr, but then he looks away and becomes cold again. Day 7. I think I understand now. He's not afraid of me. He's afraid of how much he wants me. Afraid of how the mate bond makes him feel out of control. He told me tonight that alphas can't afford to show weakness, can't afford to need anyone more than they need him. Day 12. He's going to reject me. I can see it in the way he's pulling back, the way he talks about political necessities and appropriate matches. Part of me wants to fight for what we have, but I'm tired of begging for scraps of affection from someone who sees love as a weakness. Lyra closed the journal, her hand shaking slightly. She'd expected tactical information about fighting techniques or physical vulnerabilities. Instead, she'd found something much more dangerous. Understanding. Cade wasn't just a cruel alpha who enjoyed destroying lesser wolves. He was a man so terrified of vulnerability that he'd rather destroy his own happiness than risk being genuinely known by someone. The question was, would that knowledge help her survive tomorrow night, or would it get her killed by making her hesitate at a crucial moment? Outside her window, the moon was waxing toward full, and Oracle Vera's midnight deadline was approaching fast. If you're rooting for Lyra to survive what's coming next, hit subscribe if you haven't, because the next 24 hours will determine whether justice wins or power crushes another innocent soul. Chapter 7. Second Trial. Midnight came with the sound of footsteps on stone. Lyra had been awake for hours, staring at the full moon through her narrow window and wrestling with the decision that would define the rest of her life. Oracle Vera's offer sat like a weight in her chest. Risk everything for power, or face Cade with nothing but determination and die within minutes. When the ancient werewolf entered her cell, she moved with the fluid grace of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "Have you decided, child?" Oracle Vera asked without preamble. Lyra took a deep breath. "I have questions first." "Of course you do. Ask them quickly. The moon's power peaks in less than an hour, and we'll need every moment if you choose the ritual. If I survive the awakening, what exactly will I become? You said I'd be like my great-grandmother, but what does that actually mean in practical terms?" Oracle Vera settled into the chair, her ancient eyes reflecting moonlight. Like a predator's, Isabella Silverblood could command any werewolf within a 100-mile radius. Not suggest, not influence command. Their wolves would submit to hers regardless of their human mind's wishes. She could shift into forms that don't exist in nature. Wolves the size of bears, with strength that could shatter stone and speed that made her appear to teleport. She paused, letting that sink in. She could also work the old magic. Call storms, heal mortal wounds, see through the eyes of any wolf in her territory. At the height of her power, she was essentially a one-woman army with supernatural intelligence gathering. And the other alphas killed her because they were afraid. They killed her because she was planning to unite all werewolf territories under a single crown, her own. She believed that scattered, feuding packs made all werewolves vulnerable to human discovery and persecution. She wanted to create a shadow nation, a supernatural kingdom that could protect our people properly. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the stone walls around her. She wanted to rule them all. She wanted to save them all. Oracle Vera corrected. The methods were debatable, but her goals were noble, even if her approach was authoritarian. "And you think I'd make the same choices?" The oracle's smile was enigmatic. "I think you'd make your own choices. The question is whether you'll live long enough to make any choices at all." Lyra stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit courtyard where tomorrow night's battle would take place. She could see workers already setting up the combat arena, a circular space marked with ancient symbols, surrounded by tiered seating for the hundreds of spectators who would come to watch her die. "There's something else," she said quietly. "I've been having dreams, not the suppressed memories you mentioned, new dreams. Dreams where I'm standing in that arena, and I'm different, stronger, but also angry, angrier than I've ever been in my life." "Power amplifies what's already inside you," Oracle Vera said carefully. If you're carrying rage, awakening your abilities will make that rage proportionally stronger as well. What if I can't control it? What if I become something worse than the alphas who destroyed my family? The question hung in the air between them, like a sword ready to fall. Oracle Vera was quiet for a long moment, studying Lyra with the intensity of someone seeing all the way through to her soul. "Do you know what your great-grandmother's greatest strength was?" she asked finally. "Her power?" "Her doubt." The oracle stood and moved to stand beside Lyra at the window. Isabella questioned every decision, agonized over every choice, constantly worried that she was becoming the very thing she'd set out to fight against. It was that doubt, that constant self-examination, that kept her human even when she wielded godlike power. She placed a weathered hand on Lyra's shoulder. "The fact that you're afraid of becoming a monster is the best evidence I have that you won't become one. Monsters don't worry about their own monstrosity." Lyra closed her eyes, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on her shoulders. Her family's legacy, her people's survival, her own desperate need to prove that she was worth more than the world had told her. "If I do this," she said slowly, "and if I survive both the awakening and the fight, what happens next? Do I just go home? Pretend to be normal?" "Child," Oracle Vera laughed, a sound like silver bells in a winter storm. "If you survive tomorrow night, as a fully awakened silver blood, normal will never be an option again. Every alpha in the kingdom will either want to serve you or destroy you. Every rejected wolf will look to you as either salvation or false hope. Every human government will add you to their supernatural threat assessment lists. You're not exactly selling this. I'm being honest about the cost." The oracle's expression grew serious. Power always comes with a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it to save your own life, and possibly change the world in the process. Lyra thought about Elena, crying silent tears as she signed away Lyra's life for political convenience. About Cade, so terrified of genuine connection that he'd rather destroy his own mate than risk being vulnerable. About Celeste Ravenclaw, and countless other wolves who'd been cast aside by a system that treated them as disposable. About the workers in the courtyard below, setting up an arena where she was expected to die quietly and let the status quo continue unchanged. "There's one more thing I need to know," she said. "The ritual, what are the actual odds of survival?" Oracle Vera was quiet for so long that Lyra began to think she wouldn't answer. "Historically," the ancient werewolf said finally, "about 1 in 4, but those statistics include wolves who attempted the awakening ritual without proper bloodline heritage, without emotional catalyst, without desperate need driving them forward. And with all those factors? With all those factors, your odds improve to perhaps 1 in 3. Lyra felt her stomach drop. 67% chance of death just from the ritual itself, before I even face Cade. Yes, but 100% chance of death if you face him without it. The mathematics were brutal but clear. Die almost certainly trying to become powerful enough to survive, or die absolutely certainly as the wolf she currently was. She turned away from the window and met Oracle Vera's ancient gaze directly. "What do I need to do?" The oracle's smile was proud and terrified in equal measure. "Are you certain? Once we begin, there's no turning back. Either you'll emerge as one of the most powerful supernatural beings on the planet, or you'll die in more agony than any wolf should ever experience." "I'm certain." "Then we begin now. Remove your clothes. The ritual requires direct contact between your skin and the moonlight." As Lyra undressed, Oracle Vera began pulling items from a leather bag that seemed to contain far more than its size should allow. Crystalline vials filled with silver liquid, carved bones that looked ancient beyond measure, a knife with a blade that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. "The process has 3 stages," the oracle explained as she arranged the items in a precise pattern around the small room. "First, I'll break the binding spells that have suppressed your abilities since childhood. This will feel like your skin is being torn away from the inside." "Lovely." "Second, your true wolf will emerge for the first time. This may involve physical transformation beyond normal shifting. Your great-grandmother's wolf form was unique. This stage typically causes loss of consciousness from the pain. And the third stage? Oracle Vera paused in her preparations, meeting Lyra's eyes with something that might have been compassion. The third stage is when your human consciousness merges with your awakened abilities. If your mind can't handle the power, if the rage or pain or sheer overwhelming sensation breaks your sanity, she shrugged eloquently. I go mad. You go mad, and I'll be forced to kill you before you can hurt innocent people. Lyra nodded, surprised by how calm she felt. Maybe she was already going mad, and the ritual would just make it official. One last question, she said. If I survive all 3 stages, will I still be me? Will I still be Lyra? Or will I become someone else entirely? Oracle Vera's expression softened. You'll still be you, child, just more than you ever imagined you could be. Outside, the moon reached its zenith, flooding the stone room with silver light. It's time, Oracle Vera said, raising the obsidian knife toward the window. Are you ready to discover what you truly are? Lyra took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the ritual circle. I'm ready. The first cut drew blood that gleamed like liquid starlight in the moonbeams, and the ancient words Oracle Vera spoke seemed to make the very air vibrate with power. The breaking had begun. Chapter 8. Truth Revealed. The first stage felt like being struck by lightning from the inside out. Lyra's scream echoed off the stone walls as Oracle Vera's blade traced symbols across her arms, each cut releasing 20 years of suppressed power in violent bursts. The binding spells shattered like glass, and with each break, memories flooded back with crystalline clarity. A woman with silver hair lifting her toward the stars. You are the moon's daughter, little wolf. Never forget what you are. Fire consuming her childhood home while her grandmother fought a dozen attackers at once. Run, little star, run and hide until you're strong enough to reclaim what's yours. Elena finding her in the cave 3 days later, terrified and alone. I'll keep you safe, child, but we must never speak of what you were before. The memories came faster now, 20 years of suppressed identity crashing back in waves that left her gasping. She remembered her real name, her real heritage, the lullabies her grandmother had sung in the old tongue that spoke of power and responsibility, and the terrible weight of leadership. Stage 1 complete, Oracle Vera announced, her voice sounding distant and strange. Your bindings are broken. Can you hear me, child? Lyra tried to answer, but her voice emerged as something between a growl and a sob. The pain was indescribable, but underneath it, she could feel something else building. Power. Raw, ancient, terrible power that made her skin feel too small to contain it. Stage 2 begins now, the oracle warned. Try not to fight what's coming. The transformation started in her bones. Lyra had shifted into wolf form hundreds of times throughout her life, and it had always been smooth, natural, as easy as breathing. This was nothing like that. This felt like her skeleton was being rewritten from the inside out, like her very DNA was being reforged in cosmic fire. Her wolf form, when it finally emerged, was nothing like the small gray creature she'd always been. She was massive, easily twice the size of any normal werewolf, with fur that shifted from silver to black like liquid moonlight. Her eyes blazed with inner fire, and when she opened her jaws to howl, the sound shattered every piece of glass in the tower. But it was the third stage that nearly killed her. As her consciousness merged with her awakened abilities, Lyra felt her mind expand beyond anything she'd thought possible. Suddenly she could sense every werewolf within miles, their locations, their emotions, their pack bonds. She could feel the pull of their wolves, the instinctive recognition of her superior bloodline that made them want to submit even from a distance. She could also feel their fear. Word of her challenge had spread throughout the supernatural community, and dozens of powerful wolves had come to witness tomorrow night's spectacle. They were all here now, in the castle and the surrounding areas, and they were all terrified of what she might become. Good, her wolf purred with vicious satisfaction. Let them fear us. Let them understand what it means to underestimate a silver blood. But it was what she sensed from the royal quarters that made her blood run cold. King Aldrich wasn't alone in his private chambers. He was meeting with 3 other alphas, powerful wolves whose territories bordered the kingdom's most strategic resources, and they were planning to ensure that tomorrow night's challenge ended with Lyra's death, regardless of the outcome of her fight with Cade. Cannot allow a silver blood to survive, Alpha Marcus Ironwood was saying, his words carrying clearly to her enhanced senses. If she defeats Cade, she'll have legal claim to his territory and resources. If she dies fighting him, she becomes a martyr that other rejected wolves might rally around. Either outcome destabilizes the current power structure. The girl must die, Alpha Vincent Shadowmere agreed, but it must look natural. An accident during combat, perhaps, or a heart attack from the stress of fighting above her abilities. I have contacts among the arena workers, Alpha David Stormclaw added. Silver dust in the combat circle would weaken her wolf considerably, make her vulnerable to a killing blow that might not otherwise succeed. King Aldrich's ancient voice was thoughtful. And if she proves more resilient than expected? Then we activate the contingency plan, Alpha Marcus said grimly. Crossbow bolts from the spectator galleries. Make it look like rogue wolf hunters infiltrated the crowd. The kingdom mourns a tragic attack, and the silver bloodline dies with her. Lyra's transformed consciousness reeled with the implications. The challenge itself was meaningless. They'd never intended to let her survive, regardless of whether she won or lost. She was a threat to be eliminated, not a legal combatant to be respected. They fear us because they know what we could become, her wolf snarled. They remember what grandmother could do, and they won't risk letting history repeat itself. But there was something else in the supernatural currents around the castle, something that made her newly awakened instincts prickle with warning. Alina was here. Her former pack leader was in one of the guest quarters, and she wasn't alone. Cade was with her, along with someone whose psychic signature felt wrong in ways that made Lyra's enhanced senses recoil. She focused her attention on that room, using abilities she was still learning to understand, and what she discovered made her stomach turn. Enhancement process is complete, a voice like grinding stone was saying. The Alpha's strength has been tripled, his speed doubled, his healing accelerated beyond normal werewolf parameters. The girl won't survive 30 seconds of combat. And the side effects? Alina's voice was small and worried. Temporary, the stranger assured her. Enhanced aggression, reduced empathy, possible loss of rational thought during combat. But these fade within hours of the enhancer wearing off. You're turning him into a monster, Alina whispered. I'm ensuring the natural order remains intact. Cade's voice was different now, harder, more vicious than she'd ever heard it. The silver bloodline ends tomorrow night, and werewolf society remains stable. Lyra felt her enhanced consciousness processing the information at superhuman speed. Cade had been chemically altered to ensure her death. The king and his allies were planning to assassinate her, if she somehow survived the rigged combat. Alina had helped orchestrate the entire trap, and was now having second thoughts that came 24 hours too late. She was surrounded by enemies who had planned her destruction down to the smallest detail. Then we give them something to truly fear, her wolf growled. Let them see what happens when they back a silver blood into a corner. Lyra, Oracle Vera's voice cut through her expanding awareness, like a blade. Focus on my voice. You're losing yourself to the power. Come back to me. With tremendous effort, Lyra pulled her consciousness back from its supernatural expansion, and focused on the ancient werewolf kneeling beside her. Oracle Vera's face was pale with concern, and Lyra realized she'd been unconscious for several minutes, while her awakened abilities ran wild. I'm back, she managed, her voice still carrying harmonics that made the stone walls vibrate. How do you feel? Lyra took inventory of her transformed body and expanded consciousness. The pain was gone, replaced by a sense of power that was both intoxicating and terrifying. She could feel every heartbeat in the castle, could sense the emotional states of wolves miles away, could command pack bonds with a thought. She had become exactly what her great-grandmother had been, a supernatural apex predator with abilities that transcended normal werewolf limitations. I feel, she started then stopped, as the full implications hit her. Oracle, They're not planning to let me survive tomorrow night regardless of whether I win the challenge. What do you mean? Lyra quickly explained what she'd overheard using her enhanced senses. Oracle Vera's expression grew darker with each revelation. I feared as much, the ancient werewolf said when Lyra finished. The political implications of your survival are too significant for them to leave to chance. So what do? I can't run, they'd hunt me down. I can't hide. They know what I am now. And I can't fight them all, even with these new abilities. Oracle Vera was quiet for a long moment, studying Lyra with calculating eyes. There is one option, she said finally, but it's risky beyond measure, and it will change everything. Tell me. We don't wait for tomorrow night's challenge. We act tonight, while they think you're still weak and unprepared. The Oracle's smile was sharp as winter moonlight. We remind the werewolf world why the silver bloodline was feared enough to require genocide. Lyra felt her enhanced abilities purr with anticipation. What did you have in mind? Revolution, child. Swift, decisive, and absolutely terrifying. Oracle Vera stood, power radiating from her ancient frame. It's time to show them what happens when they underestimate a wolf with nothing left to lose. Chapter 9. Final Confrontation. The throne room doors exploded inward at precisely 2 minutes past midnight. Lyra strode through the splintered wood with Oracle Vera at her side, her transformed wolf form radiating power that made the very air shimmer. The royal guard stationed outside hadn't even had time to raise an alarm. Her enhanced abilities had sent them into submission before they could react. King Aldrich looked up from his private council with the 3 conspirator alphas, his ancient face registering genuine shock for the first time in centuries. Impossible. Alpha Marcus Ironwood breathed. The ritual wasn't supposed to happen until tomorrow night. Surprise, Lyra said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystal chandeliers ring like bells. Turns out, when you plan someone's assassination in elaborate detail, they tend to take preemptive action. She shifted back to human form, a process that now took less than a heartbeat, and stood before them wearing clothes that Oracle Vera had conjured with old magic. Her silver hair fell past her shoulders in waves that seemed to capture and hold moonlight, and her eyes blazed with power that made even the king flinch. Lyra Silverblood, King Aldrich said slowly, using her true name for the first time. You've made a terrible mistake, coming here. Have I? Lyra stepped further into the room, her enhanced senses monitoring every wolf in the castle, because from where I'm standing, the only mistake was trusting that you'd honor the laws you claim to uphold. She turned her gaze to each of the conspirator alphas in turn. Silver Dust in the combat circle. Alpha Stormclaw. Really? I expected more creativity from someone of your reputation. Alpha David went pale. You couldn't possibly know. I know everything that happens within 100 miles of me, Lyra interrupted. Every conversation, every heartbeat, every desperate plan to ensure I don't survive long enough to become a threat to your comfortable little power structure. She focused on Alpha Marcus next, crossbow bolts from the galleries, dressed as rogue hunters to provide plausible deniability. Tell me, did it ever occur to you that maybe, just maybe, if you need to assassinate someone to maintain your power, you don't deserve that power in the first place? This is treason, Alpha Vincent Shadowmere snarled, starting to shift. You dare threaten us in the king's own. Lyra's power lashed out like a whip, and suddenly Vincent was frozen mid-transformation, his wolf caught between forms in what looked like agonizing suspension. I'm not threatening you, she said softly. I'm giving you information about what happens next. You can choose to listen, or you can choose to test whether I'm bluffing about my abilities, but I promise you, my great-grandmother could command any wolf within her range. I inherited that ability, along with several others you've probably forgotten about. She released Vincent, who collapsed to the floor gasping. The other alphas took several steps back. Your Majesty, Oracle Vera spoke for the first time, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. The silver bloodline was eliminated because Isabella wanted to unite all werewolf territories under a single crown. The conspiracy succeeded because you sanctioned it. Iana because you feared losing your own throne to someone more powerful than yourself. King Aldrich's expression hardened. That was necessary for the stability of... Necessary for your continued rule, Oracle Vera corrected. But now her granddaughter stands before you, awakened and aware of the full scope of your betrayal. The question is, what happens next? The throne room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Lyra could feel the supernatural currents shifting as wolves throughout the castle became aware of her presence and power. Some were afraid. Others were curious. A few felt something that might have been hope. "I'm going to make you an offer," Lyra said, addressing King Aldrich directly. "One chance to salvage this situation without bloodshed. I'm listening. You allow my challenge against Cade to proceed as planned. But, fairly. No enhancements on his side, no assassination attempts on mine, no rigged combat circles, just two wolves settling a legal dispute, according to your own laws." She paused, letting that sink in. "If he defeats me legitimately, I accept the outcome and leave the kingdom forever. And if you win? If I win, I claim the territory I'm legally entitled to, and you stop treating rejected wolves like disposable garbage." Lyra's voice grew harder. "I'm not trying to overthrow you or unite the kingdoms or recreate my grandmother's empire. I just want to live without constantly looking over my shoulder for the next political knife aimed at my back." Alpha Marcus laughed bitterly. "You expect us to believe you'll be content with a single territory? That you won't use your abilities to expand your power until you control everything? I expect you to honor your own laws," Lyra shot back, "or admit that werewolf justice is a fiction designed to protect the powerful and crush anyone who dares challenge the status quo." She turned in a slow circle, addressing not just the conspirators, but every wolf whose enhanced senses were monitoring this confrontation from elsewhere in the castle. "I know you're all listening. Every alpha, every beta, every wolf who came to watch me die tomorrow night for your entertainment." Her voice carried through pack bonds and supernatural channels, reaching hundreds of listeners simultaneously. "You've been told I'm a threat to stability, that I'm dangerous, that the silver bloodline deserved extinction." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But ask yourselves, who decided that? Who declared my family too dangerous to exist? Who wrote the laws that make it legal for powerful alphas to reject and destroy their mates with impunity?" Her eyes blazed brighter. "It was the same wolves who benefit most from keeping the rest of you in line. The same wolves who are planning to murder me tomorrow because they're terrified of what might happen if you all realize you have more power than they've let you believe." The supernatural currents in the castle shifted as her words hit home. She could feel doubt spreading through the assembled wolves, questions that had been suppressed for generations suddenly demanding answers. "Your Majesty," she said, turning back to King Aldrich, "you have until dawn to decide. Either you honor your laws and let my challenge proceed fairly, or I invoke my grandmother's legacy and start doing things the way she would have done them." "Is that a threat?" "It's a choice." Lyra's smile was sharp. "My grandmother wanted to rule through force because she believed werewolves needed a strong hand to survive. I'd prefer to live in a world where justice actually means something, where legal rights aren't just convenient fictions for the powerful to hide behind." She started toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and one more thing. I know about the enhancements Cade received. Whatever that alchemist gave him, it needs to be reversed before tomorrow night. Or the challenge is forfeit, and I claim my compensation by default." "You can't possibly prove—" "I can sense the chemical corruption in his system from here," Lyra interrupted Alpha Marcus. "My abilities include detecting supernatural alterations to wolf biology. So either he fights me clean, or you admit publicly that you rigged the challenge and accept the legal consequences." She walked toward the door, Oracle Vera falling into step beside her. The royal guards stepped aside automatically, their wolves recognizing her superior bloodline, even if their human minds hadn't caught up yet. "Lyra," King Aldrich's voice stopped her at the threshold. "If I agree to your terms, if the challenge proceeds fairly and you win, what then? What do you actually want?" She looked back over her shoulder at the ancient monarch who had sanctioned her family's genocide and nearly succeeded in finishing the job. "I want what every rejected wolf wants, Your Majesty, to be seen as something more than a political inconvenience, to have my worth determined by my choices rather than my bloodline or my beauty, or how useful I am to someone else's ambitions." Her eyes found each of the conspirator alphas in turn. "And I want you all to remember this moment. Remember what happened when you cornered a silver blood and assumed she'd die quietly, because the next rejected wolf who invokes their rights might not be as interested in peaceful solutions as I am." The walk back to her tower was surreal. Every wolf she passed felt her power and either bowed their heads in submission or stared in shocked recognition. By the time she reached her quarters, the entire castle was buzzing with news of her transformation. Oracle Vera followed her inside, her ancient face proud and worried in equal measure. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever witnessed," she said. "Maybe both." Lyra collapsed onto her bed, suddenly exhausted despite her enhanced abilities. "Do you think they'll agree to fair terms?" "I think you've given them no choice. If they refuse, you've already exposed their conspiracy to every wolf in listening range. The political fallout would be catastrophic." Oracle Vera settled into the chair. "But be prepared for them to try something subtle. They're cornered now, which makes them desperate." Lyra nodded, her enhanced senses monitoring the supernatural currents throughout the castle. She could feel the king and his conspirators arguing frantically, could sense Cade's confusion and growing anger as he learned about the night's events, could feel Elena's overwhelming guilt and fear from her guest quarters. And underneath it all, she could feel something else. A building wave of hope from the castle's lower-ranking wolves, servants and guards and minor pack members who had never dared to challenge the established order, but were now watching a rejected wolf stand up to the most powerful alphas in the kingdom and survive. "We've started something," her wolf observed, "whether we intended to or not." "Oracle," Lyra said quietly, "what if I'm not strong enough for what comes next? What if I win tomorrow night, and then discover I have no idea how to actually lead or change anything meaningful?" The ancient werewolf's smile was gentle. "Then you'll learn, child, the same way every leader throughout history has learned, by making mistakes, asking for help, and refusing to give up when things get difficult." She stood and moved toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow night, you face Cade in combat that will determine not just your fate, but possibly the future of every rejected wolf in the kingdom." She paused at the threshold. No pressure. After Oracle Vera left, Lyra lay in the darkness, with her enhanced senses monitoring the castle's nighttime activities. She could feel Cade's chemical enhancements being forcibly purged from his system by royal healers, a painful process from what she could sense. Could feel the king's conspirators dispersing to their quarters with plans hastily revised. Could feel hundreds of wolves throughout the castle, wondering what tomorrow would bring. And in the guest quarters, she could feel Elena crying herself to sleep while whispering apologies that would never be heard. Lyra closed her eyes and tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Tomorrow night would determine everything. Her future, her freedom, possibly her life. She'd gone from powerless rogue to supernatural apex predator in less than 24 hours, and now hundreds of wolves were watching to see what she'd do with abilities that could reshape their entire society. No pressure indeed, she thought, staring at the ceiling as dawn approached. No pressure at all. Chapter 10. Resolution. The Moonrise Arena was designed for spectacle, not fairness. Lyra stood in the center of the ancient combat circle, as thousands of werewolves filled the surrounding tiers, their voices creating a wall of sound that would have been overwhelming before her transformation. Now her enhanced senses filtered the noise into individual conversations, letting her hear everything from excited betting on her survival time to whispered speculation about whether the silver blood rumors were true. The moon hung full and heavy overhead, its light turning the white marble arena into something ethereal and deadly. Across the circle, Cade emerged from the Alpha's entrance to thunderous applause. Even purged of his chemical enhancements, he was magnificent, tall and powerful, moving with the predatory grace of someone who had never lost a fight in his life. His storm-gray eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the mate bond flared between them like lightning. She could feel his confusion, his anger, his reluctant admiration for what she'd become, and underneath it all, buried so deep he probably didn't recognize it himself. King Aldrich stood in the royal box, his ancient voice magically amplified to carry across the arena. "We gather tonight to witness a legal challenge under the old laws," he announced. "Lyra Silverblood, last heir of the Moon's Crown bloodline, has invoked the right of challenge against Alpha Cade Blackthorn of the Northern Territories. The terms are clear: single combat in shifted form, no weapons, no assistance. Victory goes to submission, death, or surrender." He paused, his eyes finding Lyra's across the distance. "Let it be known that this challenge proceeds under royal witness, with no interference from external parties. The outcome will be honored by all, regardless of personal preferences or political implications." The warning was clear. The conspirators had been told to stand down, at least for tonight. "Combatants, prepare yourselves," King Aldrich commanded. "On my signal, you may begin." Lyra shifted into her transformed wolf form, feeling power ripple through her enhanced body. She was massive now, nearly twice Cade's size even in his alpha form, with silver-black fur that seemed to drink moonlight, and eyes that blazed with inner fire. The crowd gasped at the sight. This was no ordinary wolf. This was something out of legend, a creature that belonged in ancient stories about the moon goddess herself. Cade shifted as well, his own wolf form impressive, but suddenly seeming almost small in comparison. His black fur bristled with aggression, but she could sense his uncertainty. This wasn't the easy kill he'd been promised when he agreed to the challenge. This was something else entirely. "Begin," King Aldrich's voice cracked like a whip. Cade lunged immediately, moving with the speed and precision of extensive combat training. He aimed for her throat, a killing blow designed to end the fight in seconds. Lyra's enhanced reflexes made him seem to move in slow motion. She sidestepped easily, using her greater size to knock him off balance with a casual swipe of one massive paw. Cade tumbled across the marble, recovered with impressive agility, and came at her again. This time she caught him mid-leap, her jaws closing around his shoulder with enough force to make him yelp in pain. But she didn't crush, not yet. Instead, she threw him across the arena like a rag doll. The crowd's excited cheering faltered into confused murmurs. This wasn't a fight, it was a demonstration of overwhelming superiority. Cade struggled to his feet, blood matting his fur where her teeth had punctured his shoulder. His eyes were wild now, the careful strategy of a trained fighter, giving way to desperate survival instinct. "He's afraid," her wolf observed. "Good. Let him feel what we felt when he rejected us in front of the world." But as Cade circled warily, looking for an opening that didn't exist, Lyra felt something unexpected. Pity. She remembered Celeste's journal, the entries describing a man so terrified of vulnerability that he'd rather destroy his own happiness than risk being truly known. She remembered Oracle Vera's words about power amplifying what was already inside, and realized that what she felt wasn't murderous rage or revenge lust. It was disappointment. Disappointment that someone with so much potential had chosen fear over growth, that an alpha, who could have been great, had settled for being merely powerful, that her mate, the wolf the moon goddess herself had chosen for her, would rather kill her than face his own emotional cowardice. Cade lunged again, and this time Lyra didn't dodge. She let him tackle her, let his jaws close on her neck in what would have been a killing bite against any ordinary wolf. But her transformed body was far from ordinary. His teeth couldn't penetrate her enhanced hide. She felt the pressure but no pain, and the shocked confusion radiating from him was almost comical. "This is what you rejected," she projected through the pack bonds, knowing he could hear her even in wolf form. "This power, this heritage, this connection, you threw it all away because you were too afraid to be vulnerable." She threw him off with minimal effort, rising to her full height, so the entire arena could see the massive silver-blood wolf in all her terrifying glory. "I could kill you right now," she continued. "End this in seconds and claim everything you tried to deny me. Your territory, your resources, your pack." Cade struggled to his feet, his wolf form battered and bloodied, but instead of attacking again, he did something that shocked everyone watching. He bowed his head in submission. The arena erupted in chaos. Alphas didn't submit, especially not to rejected mates, especially not in public challenges with thousands of witnesses. But there was Cade, the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, offering his throat to a wolf he'd tried to destroy less than a week ago. "Why?" Lyra demanded through their bond connection. She felt his response, raw with emotions he'd spent a lifetime suppressing. "Because you were right. About all of it. I was so afraid of needing you that I convinced myself you weren't worth having. But standing here, seeing what you've become, despite everything I did to break you." He lifted his head slightly, meeting her blazing eyes. "I don't deserve your mercy, but I'm asking for it anyway." Lyra stood frozen, torn between the satisfying simplicity of revenge and the complicated messiness of grace. Her wolf wanted blood, wanted to make him pay for every moment of humiliation and pain. But her human heart remembered Celeste's journal entries, remembered that Cade was as much a victim of the system as she was, just in a different way. He'd been taught that vulnerability was weakness, that genuine connection was dangerous, that an alpha's worth was measured in power rather than compassion. She could kill him and prove that the strong survive by crushing the weak. Or she could spare him and prove that strength included choosing mercy when you had every right to choose violence. "Get up," she commanded through their bond. "This fight is over. But you're not dead yet." Cade rose slowly, his wolf form trembling with a mixture of relief and shame. Lyra shifted back to human form, standing naked in the moonlight with power radiating from every inch of her transformed body. Oracle Vera was already moving toward her with clothes, but Lyra's voice carried across the silent arena before she could cover herself. "I, Lyra Silverblood, claim victory in this challenge by submission," she announced. "As is my right, under the old laws, I claim compensation equivalent to what I would have gained through the mate bond." She paused, letting the legal implications sink in for everyone watching. "However, I'm also invoking my right to negotiate the specific terms of that compensation with the defeated party. Rather than claiming Cade's territory outright, I propose an alternative arrangement." King Aldrich leaned forward in his royal box, clearly fascinated by this unexpected development. "The Northern Territories will be split," Lyra continued. "Cade retains control of the primary regions and his existing pack, but the borderlands, the territories where rejected wolves and rogues currently struggle to survive, those become mine. I establish a new pack for wolves who have been cast aside by the current system, a place where your worth isn't determined by your bloodline or your political connections, but by your choices and your character." The arena erupted in shocked whispers. She was essentially creating a sanctuary for the supernatural society's unwanted, and doing it with the legal authority that came from defeating an alpha in challenge. "Furthermore," she said, raising her voice over the commotion, "any alpha who rejects a true mate from this day forward must offer equivalent compensation directly to the rejected party. No more quiet disappearances, no more convenient exiles, no more wolves being thrown away because they're politically inconvenient." She turned to face King Aldrich directly. "These terms are my official claim for compensation. I trust you'll honor them as you promised to honor the outcome of this challenge." The ancient monarch was silent for a long moment, his calculating eyes studying her with new appreciation. "The terms are unusual," he said finally, "but legal under the old laws. Very well, Lyra Silverblood. Your claim is recognized. The borderlands of the Northern Territories are hereby granted to you as sovereign territory, with full rights to establish pack law as you see fit." He stood from his throne, and his next words carried the weight of royal decree. "Let it be known throughout all werewolf territories that the Silver bloodline has returned, And let it also be known that the laws regarding mate bonds and rejection have been revised to include mandatory compensation. Any alpha who violates these terms will answer to the crown. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Excitement from the lower-ranking wolves, concern from the established alphas, and something like hope from those who had experienced rejection themselves. Lyra pulled on the clothes Oracle Vera provided, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes watching her every move. She'd come to this arena expecting to die, and instead, she'd created something that might actually change werewolf society for the better. Not bad for a rejected rogue. Her wolf purred with satisfaction. Cade shifted back to human form, looking smaller and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. He approached slowly, keeping his head bowed in a gesture of continued submission. "Lyra," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I know I don't deserve to ask this, but the mate bond, is there any chance?" She felt the connection between them, still present despite everything that had happened. The moon goddess's gift hadn't been destroyed by rejection or violence. It was still there, waiting to see what they'd choose to do with it. "The bond exists," she said carefully, "but bonds require trust, Katie. And right now, I don't trust you not to reject me again, the moment it becomes politically convenient." His face crumpled with genuine pain. "I understand." However, she continued, surprising herself, people can change. If you actually work on becoming someone capable of genuine vulnerability, instead of just performing whatever role you think an alpha should play, maybe we can revisit this conversation in a few years. It wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't reconciliation, but it was possibilities which was more than either of them had a right to expect after everything that had happened. "I'll earn it," Cade promised. "However long it takes, I'll prove I can be better than I was." "We'll see," Lyra replied neutrally. She turned away from him, and from the arena, Oracle Vera falling into step beside her as they walked toward the exit. Behind them, the crowd was already dispersing, thousands of conversations starting about what they'd just witnessed, and what it might mean for the future. "Quite the evening," Oracle Vera observed dryly. "You've just rewritten werewolf politics, established a sanctuary for rejected wolves, and left your mate alive, but thoroughly humiliated. Your grandmother would be proud." "Would she?" Lyra asked. "She wanted to rule through force. I'm trying to change things through legal reform and setting an example." "Exactly." The ancient werewolf smiled. "She tried to save werewolf society by dominating it. You're trying to save it by proving that mercy and strength aren't mutually exclusive. It's a more subtle approach, but potentially more effective in the long term." They emerged from the arena into the cool night air, and Lyra took a deep breath of freedom. She was alive. She was powerful. She had territory and legal recognition, and the chance to build something meaningful from the wreckage of her rejection. And she'd done it all without becoming the monster they'd expected her to be. Not bad for a week's work, she thought. 3 months later, the borderlands of the Northern Territories had transformed in ways Lyra hadn't imagined possible. Where there had been struggling rogue camps, there were now established settlements. Where there had been desperate survival, there was now community. Rejected wolves from across the kingdom had come seeking sanctuary, and Lyra had welcomed them all. Her pack had grown to nearly 200 wolves, outcasts, and rogues, and those who simply didn't fit the traditional pack structure. They were building something new here, something that valued individuals for their contributions rather than their bloodlines. It wasn't perfect. There were still territorial disputes with neighboring packs, still political pressure from alphas, who resented the changes she'd forced on their society. But every day brought new wolves seeking refuge, new stories of mates invoking their rights to compensation, new evidence that the system was slowly changing. Alina had come to visit last week, asking for forgiveness that Lyra wasn't ready to give. But they'd talked, really talked, for the first time in months. Maybe someday they'd rebuild their relationship into something honest. Or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, Lyra was learning that she could survive without her adoptive mother's approval. Cade had kept his distance, working on his own territory, and reportedly treating his pack members with unprecedented fairness. Lyra heard through Oracle Vera that he'd started therapy with a supernatural counselor, actually addressing the emotional issues that had led to his pattern of rejection. Whether that would be enough to salvage their mate bond remained to be seen, but at least he was trying. As for Lyra herself, she stood on the cliff overlooking her new territory, watching the sun set over lands that now belonged to her pack. Wolves who had once been invisible were now building homes and lives and futures. "We did it," her wolf said contentedly. "We survived, we claimed our power, and we're using it to help others instead of crushing them." "We did," Lyra agreed aloud, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in equal measure. She was Lyra Silverblood, last heir of the Moon's Crown bloodline, alpha of the Borderlands pack. She was powerful beyond imagination, legally recognized, and finally valued for exactly who she chose to be. And in a world that had tried so hard to destroy her, that might have been the greatest victory of all. If Lyra's journey from rejected mate to powerful alpha inspired you, subscribe to support more stories that prove your worth isn't determined by those who underestimate you. Every subscription helps us bring you tales of wolves who refuse to stay invisible,